I'd say there's just a huge benefit to aligning yourself with the goals and projects of co-management institutions, because not only do they have an excellent understanding of the projects that are needed, projects that will be useful and meaningful and are done in good partnership.
Hi again, everyone. That's just one short quote from Quinna Laver, a recent graduate student from the Dalhousie Marine Affairs program, and I was her supervisor for her major project. And with this podcast, what we really wanted to highlight was some of the ideas and thoughts and benefits around doing what we call co-management led research. And Quinna will touch on this when she explains the work that she did. Quinna was able to come to a new region and embed herself into a major education and co-management project that involved a large number of collaborators. And I think you'll find the project itself very interesting in how one co-management board is now looking to have an impact in the education sector. Enjoy. Really great, Quinna, to have you on the co-management podcast. It was a lot of fun to host you in Labrador this past summer, and think that you have a really interesting story to share with people that are interested in co-management and potentially heading north for research or life or whatever takes them there. But I guess maybe we could start. You could just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from.
Yeah, of course. So I guess at a basic level, I'm a woman, a settler of Scottish and British descent. I grew up, my roots are in the Comox Valley, which is sort of on the mid North Island of Vancouver Island. I grew up there in a rural farming community called Dove Creek, and that's where my whole family is still. I have sisters and parents, grandparents, cousins, they're all there. I guess I grew up by the ocean and spent a lot of time in the summers sort of on beaches and things. And then I moved to Victoria, BC to go to UVic to do my undergraduate work there. And I had a lovely time. I did a couple field schools that were sort of based around the Salish Sea and that basin. And then, I worked for Parks Canada for, I guess, a few years after I graduated, and decided that it was time to go back to school. And here I am now at Dalhousie University in the Masters of Marine Management program. And I was lucky enough to be hosted by the Torngat Secretariat this summer for my internship, and that's how we got connected. And thank you so much for hosting me up in Labrador. It was an extremely unique and special summer.
Well, before we get to that, I'm really curious to know a little bit more also how you found out about your Marine Affairs program, because that was a big move for you also to leave the West Coast and come all the way to Halifax and enroll. So how did that all happen? And maybe you could tell listeners a bit about the Marine Affairs program at Dalhousie.
Yeah, of course. So I guess what prompted the move was I was working managing a team of visitor services attendants at the Gulf Islands National Park Reserve, which is a marine-based national park on sort of the islands of southern Vancouver Island. And it's technically a terrestrial park, but you can't get anywhere except for by boat. So I was spending a lot of the time in the marine environment, and I was seeing sort of conflicts between user spaces and how the ocean was changing over time while I spent quite a bit of time on it. And that drove me to think more about how ocean spaces are and places are managed, I guess. And I went to our lovely Google and plunked in, where can I, study marine management? and it came up with a few options. I was not really interested in moving to a huge city like Vancouver, so I didn't apply to UBC, but Dalhousie has a really wonderful, it's a course-based master's program where it's very interdisciplinary, really good breadth of different topics, which is another reason I was drawn to it. I was also drawn to the work experience component of it, and so yeah, I ended up in in Halifax. I also applied to a couple places abroad, but I figured that staying in Canada was where I wanted to be.
Yeah, so I think maybe you touched on it there, but I was also curious what got you interested in the topic of co-management, because I know in the Marine Affairs program, that's an elective course.
Mhm.
So when you were going through your course load, I'd be curious what brought you to want to study co-management.
Yeah, of course. So that takes me like back to my job too at Parks Canada. There was
Oh,
a
okay.
Yeah, I was involved with a project where we were trying to move campgrounds away from culturally sensitive areas. And at the Gulf Islands National Park Reserve, it's not a co-management arrangement, but the park works very closely with 19 different nations who are on various consulting boards. And that process of seeing a, I guess, like not a formalized co-management space, but a very much like negotiated, I guess, seeing that. And I'm also really interested in, having come from like a federal background, different mechanisms and governance structures to localize management. And so, looking at the courses that were offered, community co-management immediately jumped out at me as something that I'm like passionate about. And then hearing more about the work that the Secretariat is up to, sort of like ensuring that harvester and local voices are and knowledge are incorporated into management is something that I'm passionate about. I think it makes for better management, and so that's why I was interested. Mhm.
Yeah, and full disclosure for people that are listening, that Quinna took a class that I taught at Dalhousie in the Marine Affairs program, and approached me to have an internship with our co-management board in Labrador, and it all came to be this past summer. And I think it was a really good experience. But just wanted the listeners to know that was our experience this past summer. But curious again, what got in your mind to want to now go from Vancouver to Halifax, and now you're going to go north?
Yeah, of course. I don't know. I haven't traveled very much in my life, really at all, and am so rooted in place there. But I thought that there it's a very large country, and there's so many other essentially like cool ecosystems and wonderful people to meet. And so when I chose Dalhousie, I was like, okay, like I want to go explore different ways of doing things. I feel like I know the Vancouver Island area super super well, and like everything that's happening there. So yeah, I wanted to change, and then um, I met my partner James, who's from the Northwest Territories, and like hearing him talk about his experience growing up north. Growing up north was also, I think, probably influential on this front of wanting to, yeah, to explore up north and to see how things are being done.
Yeah, and thank you to James for coming up for a week this past summer and checking it out as well. I know when I spoke with him, he felt a bit of nostalgia and
Yes.
whatnot. Maybe he'll end up back in the north at some point. I also wanted to give a shout out to Dr. Megan Bailey, who certainly
Mhm.
was helpful in making all of this happen with some research dollars to get you here as well. And she's somebody that we've partnered with through academia for quite a few years now. So that
Mhm.
was greatly appreciated, and I think helped spur on this first internship that we did with the Marine Affairs program. So, yeah, let's get to that part. And I'm curious to hear your reflections on it now that the summer has passed and you're in the process of writing up your final research paper.
Yeah, of course. So, I think through excellent timing and luck and mutual interests and funding, thank you, Megan. I was able to join the Torngat Wildlife Plants Fisheries Secretariat this summer on the Paigitsiagik project. And so the Paigitsiagik project is a stewardship and education project that's being run by the Secretariat currently, where it was like well underway when I joined. So there's partnering with Inuit educators to sort of influence the education system by making different kits based on locally and culturally relevant species. So the kits are the caribou kit, the polar bear kit, the snow crab kit, and the Arctic char kit. I believe those are the four that are sort of currently being developed. And I was lucky enough to be sort of heading up the snow crab kit, which is Puchatik in Inutit, and I worked alongside the educators who were already working on the job. So these kits are designed to be implemented in schools. They're both physical and digital resources, and they're built around lesson plans. And so these lesson plans are written up there. Each kit looks quite different, I guess, but I'll speak to the Puchatik kit because it's the one I know best. There are, lesson plans that get kids out on the land, in this case to the beach, in a lot of the case, or down to docks. There are lesson plans that bring community members like elders and knowledge holders, fishers, scientists, maybe members of the Makkovik project into the classroom to be able to talk about marine and fisheries management and the ecology of the Labrador Sea. And they're all based, so like all the lesson plans have both physical resources, like there's a couple lesson plans that are meeting the curriculum requirements in the Newfoundland and Labrador curriculum for like testing a hypothesis or exploring different places. And there's tools in the kits like magnifying glasses and pH monitors. There's a GoPro to drop into the ocean to see what's under there. There's viewing buckets for people to be able to, or students to be able to see sort of what's along the intertidal. But there's also digital resources like PowerPoint presentations and worksheets to really connect kids with their local environment, with the hope of through using the snow crab as sort of like a facilitator to get to know the sea and get to know their community. Also, like the fishing culture in Nunatsiavut is huge. And so being able to explore their own like local histories and local ecologies and using those like I guess pedagogies of like land-based and community-based education to meet curriculum requirements that are set by the province that might not reflect the unique situation and unique places in Nunatsiavut. They go from K to 12. A lot of schools in Nunatsiavut are multi-grade classrooms. So the wonderful educators who sort of helped me guide me through this process, they were really helpful at letting me know the kinds of practical both restraints and opportunities that come with teaching in Nunatsiavut. So I found it was a really interesting sort of puzzle to try and take a species that I wasn't that familiar with. I'd read a lot about snow crab, but a lot of the things that, the information we have on snow crab was gathered for the commercial fishery specifically. And so taking that information and reworking it to be good learning resources for, youth.
Land and was in a classroom most of the time. So I can only imagine that students and educators, hopefully as well, will see the value in those types of things. But I know you recently presented at the Sustainable Oceans Conference in Halifax, which is a conference put off by the students in the Marine Affairs program, which I think was very well done, by the way, and also such a practical experience for everyone to be a part of.
I feel like, yeah, the conference, it was 7 minutes to squish a extremely complex and specific project into 7 minutes. So I'm glad to have a little bit more time. Thank goodness for long form media. Podcasts are wonderful. I guess graduate project wise, I'm now sort of writing a explanation, social sciences based graduate project on the Paikitsiaguk project, and specifically on the Puchitik kit. So the working title for the work right now is Bridging Knowledge and Cultivating Stewardship, a case study exploring Inuit-led marine stewardship education in the context of co-management in Nunatsiavut. I guess for our listeners, if they're not familiar with Nunatsiavut, Nunatsiavut is a northern coastal region in Labrador. It's self-governed by the Labrador Inuit, and since it is coastal, fishing resources and other coastal resources are both integral for having good food security, and also for the economy. And the snow crab specifically is a highly profitable industry. And Makkovik, which is a community that I was lucky enough to spend a week in this last summer, has a commercial fish processing facility there. And so it is a huge employer in the region, in a community of 350 ish. It employs like over 100 people when it's in full operation, processing, fishing. So it's integral to the region. So yeah, that's, I guess, some background. And as I mentioned before, the education system in Nunatsiavut is implemented by the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, and that comes with its sort of dissonances between the things that are taught and the values and priorities of communities, of what they value in education for their youth. And yeah, I think that's so important, because education is really learning about the world, learning about your place in it. And we hope that we're giving students the skills and information that they'll need to live a good life no matter where they want to go. And so I think that these stewardship and education kits are really integral in sort of forwarding that vision. Yes, so as I mentioned before, the Torngat Secretariat has partnered with our awesome expert Inuit educators, who I was so lucky to be able to work with and be guided by this summer. All the educators are creating these kits on the locally and culturally important species, as I mentioned before. All of the species are also co-managed, which I think is an important piece of the puzzle here. So the Fidgetit kit, like as I mentioned before, I'm not from Labrador, very, very far away from it. So leading up to my internship and graduate project, I was reading a lot about Nunatsiavut and snow crabs. And through this reading, I started to sort of identify, before I'd met everybody, identify different important parts of Indigenous, and more specifically like Inuit education, that have been called for by Indigenous scholars in their work. And those things I wanted to make sure we're really building the snow crab kit from the bottom up. Culturally relevant curriculum, but also culturally relevant assessment, land-based learning, incorporating local Inuit knowledge or Inuit language and Inuit knowledge, encouraging multiple ways of knowing into different lesson plans to ensure that students are growing up with an understanding of there are different tools for different scenarios, and being able to use them all as they see fit. And also like preparing students for post-secondary education. And then, of course, as like another extremely important pillar, bringing in elders and community members and knowledge holders into the classroom, and also bringing the classroom out into the community. And so from those calls to action, and then collaborating with the educators. I have so far, I guess, created 20-ish lesson plans.
Wow.
And when building the lesson plans, I mentioned sort of the really the opportunities and challenges of creating content that spans multiple grades, but also spans social studies and science curriculum, preferably mixing them both in each lesson plan, although that wasn't always possible. It's definitely a big part of the lesson plans. And luckily, Nunatsiavut, the fishing history there is really an excellent example of, and was really easy to integrate social studies and science curriculum together, because of the sort of socio-ecological landscapes that really lent themselves to that kind of exploration. So yes, those are sort of the lesson plans that we have so far. Um, and yeah, I think, I'm in the middle of sort of analyzing how the Puchatik kit is meeting calls to action. And so far we're looking pretty good. There's quite a number of Inuit resources. I guess not most, I think like half of the lesson plans are involving getting kids out of the classroom into the community, to the beach. There's a lesson on looking at the spring breakup or fall ice up and sort of taking repeat photos of how the landscape is changing over a period of a month, to observe the land and learn from it. There's also a lot of lesson plans that rely on sort of guest speakers coming in and local, scientists, knowledge holders, fishers, as I've talked about before. And there's a lot of also hands-on activities that will keep kids engaged, hopefully. And yeah, as I mentioned before, there's also lots of physical resources that come along with these. There's some, I guess we probably have 8 or something like that books, mainly based on Inuit ocean knowledge and stories. There's also, scientific quadrants for sampling. I also was able to commission some crocheted snow crabs in the various forms of their quite complicated life cycle. Snow crabs are very difficult to preserve. They're quite fragile and they lose their color. I spent way too much time on the internet trying to figure out how I was going to preserve a snow crab before I was like, oh yeah, people are capable of knitting or crocheting models of them. So those are in there. Yeah, the snow crab I find also, speaking of the life cycle, is a really, I guess it was a very easy species to incorporate stewardship information into it because it has such a complex life cycle that takes it from, 1,000 meters below sea level in muddy bottoms, in deep water coral ecosystems, the abyss, it's dark, it's cold, and that's where we sort of think about snow crabs living. But when mating season comes around, they all traverse into the shallow water for mass spawning events. They start off as these tiny, tiny little eggs that are thrown up into the water column, and they could fit on the head of a pin at their very beginning, and they live up in the areas where they can get food, where they can eat plankton and have a great time up in the very top of the water column before getting big enough to sink back down to the bottom. And so incorporating or being able to use every part of the sea as an example for learning and for how we take care of different parts of the ocean, that was pretty special. Thank you, Snow Crab, for having such a complicated life history.
Yeah, and trying to make that understandable for people at all levels of K to 12. And I do have to comment on the crocheted snow crab. I do think that was a great initiative, and they're going to be very durable. And I can see Many people on the north coast of Labrador now wanting to crochet mini animals after they see these snow crabs. They're really well done. And I also wanted to talk about your time in Makkovik, because I know as a part of your summer you were there, and I would suspect that most people, when they think about Inuit culture, probably don't immediately associate the culture with snow crab and
Mm.
and commercial fisheries like that. But I know it's a big part of living in Makkovik, and wonder if you could share your observations or thoughts and what you observed and how snow crab is so important to people in Makkovik and Nunatsiavut.
Oh yeah, of course. Um, I was so lucky to end up there, like the timing of getting there while the plant is open. This season was rather short and delayed by sea ice being sort of locking people into the bay, but I was able to make it up in time when the first landings were coming in, and I really think that being physically somewhere and seeing those things, like you can read the dollar amounts that of snow crab that come out of the Labrador Sea and 2H and 2J, but until you see it um, in person, it doesn't really register, I guess. And so I was staying with Chesley Anderson and his lovely wife, Kathy. Their family were wonderful hosts. And he took me down to the dock a couple times to, see. Like I ended up on like a fishing vessel owned by Joey Agnetuk, and he was able to like invite me onto his boat. I think is it the What's Happening? I
It
think it
is, yeah.
is. Yeah, and, like, looking down into the hold and seeing just the absolute abundance of snow crab, and the size of them, and, like, hearing him talk about how he's been fishing for decades and how much the snow crab fishery has meant for not only his own livelihood, but, like, this last summer was not a great snow crab season. Unfortunately, prices were low, but he was talking about how even if he's just breaking even, like being able to provide employment to all of the fishers and deckhands on his boat was so important to them because it's a livelihood. It's their seasonal fishery. So talking with him was really helpful. Also, like listening to they were having some trouble getting enough workers this summer, and so looking at the way that the community was really rallying around the crab processing facility, people were working their day jobs, and then also like to help keep the crab facility open, they were going after work to have enough hands to keep the facility going. Also, just seeing the crates and crates and crates of snow crab was yeah, I guess I haven't been around commercial fisheries that often, so I'm not used to the volume uh, associated with commercial fisheries, and seeing just like the like literally thousands and thousands of crab who are like strong and healthy and happy and big, and seeing the processing happen, and everyone who was like in town knowing that the first landings are coming in and you can go down to the dock and buy them straight from the fish processor, was also it was clear that it was an integral part to sort of like people's lives. Like, it's the season of the snow crab. It's when it comes in, and I was able to have like a snow crab feast at Chess's house one of the evenings. And yeah, I'd say it is extremely important to, the economic and social life in Makkovik. Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
clear.
there was something you mentioned there was super interesting about the fact that this past summer there were a shortage of workers, and this idea of people who already had other jobs in the community coming down and pitching in and helping out to make sure that the plant could operate. And I'm sure that was helpful for probably a lot of family members and neighbors,
Yeah.
and really important that the plant did have enough people to process all of that crab.
Mhm.
Was that unique to this summer, or did people talk about that?
Yeah, it seemed unique to this summer. Um, at least the people that I talked to, there was also teenagers working in the snow crab plant processing. So, what an excellent summer job. But I think that was more unusual. It didn't seem like that was a typical summer. It seemed like usually all the positions were filled. I even heard stories about, in previous years, people coming from different communities like Rigolet or Hopedale down to Makkovik to work for the snow crab fish processing facility. Um, and so it was also important for other communities. I think that the price drop, unfortunately, like broader economic, like I guess global economic um, systems weren't exactly in favor of the snow crab fishery this year.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you would know this about me or not, but when I was a teenager, I spent 4 years working in a crab plant, and I'll always remember that time. And uh, there were days I'm sure I wouldn't say I enjoyed it, but there were a lot of memories looking back at it now that I wouldn't have changed a thing, and I got to spend great times with my two sets of grandparents at the time in Mary's Harbor.
Nice.
And for that community on the south coast of Labrador, it's all about the snow crab fishery, and everybody's very in tune with what's happening and when and how important it is for everyone to
Mhm.
get sufficient work for the summer. Yeah, I could see the teenagers really being involved as well, and can probably imagine multiple generations of people in the plant that were connected, probably teenagers, parents, and potentially even aunts, uncles, and grandparents were probably all in that plant making it all work. And it was really nice that you got to go to Makkovik and spend time with Ola Anderson as well, who's
Yes.
an Inuk educator and really a leader on this project and has so much knowledge. What was it like learning from her in this work?
Oh, it was wonderful. Yeah, Ola is so generous with her time and her stories and her guidance because she has decades of experience actually in classrooms, whereas I can write a lesson plan, but I don't know how to wrangle a classroom. And I don't know how much time things take and sort of, like I have a lot of younger cousins, so I'm used to being around, kids and youth, but it was really helpful to be able to talk to her about sort of the daily realities. I also like Ola. I think she really spurred on the process for writing those lesson plans and getting things together through her encouragement and her talk about what she had completed already on the caribou kit. Yeah, like I didn't write a single lesson plan, and I up until that point, like I went to Makkovik, I didn't have a single lesson plan written, and that was in late July. And as soon as I came home back from Makkovik back to Goose Bay, I I pumped out like 15 lesson plans in like 3 weeks. It was very, I feel like just being in Makkovik and seeing the reality of sort of the space and, seeing where a school is in relation to the ocean, seeing the ways in which the community was like formed and actually looks like, and going out. Like I was so lucky, Ola's brother, Barry Anderson, as well as Chess took me out as well. But Barry also took me out, and we spent a day with Ola fishing for char, just getting that like grounded understanding of people's lives, like everyday world, and working with Ola. I came back so like ready to write because I felt like I had sort of like grounded, I don't know, grounded all of the sort of like ideas that I had floating up here. I was like, I don't know if any of these will actually work. And then spending a couple days with Ola, talking about and brainstorming different ideas, and also spending time out on the land, um, and a lot of time in boats. eating a lot of good fish and snow crab definitely made the process of creating educational materials about that so much easier and so much more, I think, useful in the long term too.
Well, some of us have had these opportunities as well, but at the same time, I feel like I still always get envious when I see people out getting their first iceberg ice and they're catching their first Arctic char and things like that. So I know you had some really special experiences that way. And
Mhm.
one of the things that we talked about, or I heard you speak about, was in the early days of deciding your project. It sounded like you weren't really quite sure why a Fish and Wildlife Co-Management Board would care about education and pedagogy and these sorts of things. And just curious if it's more obvious to you now and what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, um, when you're in a university Western education system, there's a certain idea of that certain organizations do things that are related to their mandate, and their mandate is to, protect wildlife and fisheries and manage them. And that's sort of, you do your mandate. And I I guess I was surprised at the commitment to more interdisciplinary, and in this case, like intergenerational stewardship and management strategies and projects that the Torngat Secretariat was taking on, because I hadn't seen that in other wildlife and fisheries management organizations. And as the summer progressed and as I learned more about the project, it became very clear that investing in these kinds of projects is, in the long run, an extremely effective and, I'd say, like, a very important place to be putting your efforts into, especially in a place like Nunatsiavut that is very, like, everybody fishes, like there are, like, everyone is involved in gathering and harvesting, fishing coastal resources. And so being able to support Inuit stewardship values and into the public education system, not only is that really benefiting, I think, the engagement and maybe excitement in youth about their education system as it's feeling very like relevant to their lives, but it's also really increasing like that social capacity and self-determination in research and in management, exposing kids to like land-based science activities, and the history of like the uncensored like local histories of those places. Yeah, I think that it has become very apparent that those landscapes where we talk about, needing to incorporate the social and economic and ecological sustainability sort of like as a whole, this project really brings them all together.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, and one of the things that was also great about the way you approach things was your willingness to immerse yourself in a project and an initiative that was already well underway. And sometimes that hasn't always been the case in the past when
Mm.
people want to do work in some of our communities. And I was just would love to hear your reflections at this stage on what it was like to do work within a co-management led setting, and were there advantages to that for you, or were there limitations? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Mhm. Yeah, engaging and like joining a project that was already being done and had sort of like a vision and um, um yeah, a whole strategy behind it. I'd say it was a huge benefit, because as someone who's interested in doing, research and projects that uplift communities, it would be very, like, almost impossible for an outsider to come into a place and just be like, oh, like, I need to understand what people want to see and then figure out who and how that is going to happen. And those huge parts, like literally decades of experience and yeah, and like hearing people and what they want to see, was had been done by the co-management boards. And so I'd say there's just a huge, huge benefit to aligning yourself with the goals and projects of co-management institutions, because not only do they have an excellent understanding of like the projects that are needed, projects that will be useful and meaningful and are done in good partnership, was huge. Also, just like even on a like a very on a like I guess a human resources like social capacity network sort of thing. Like I would have been so lost both in work research and like just generally life in Labrador if I had not been connected with so many wonderful people that I probably wouldn't have been connected to if I was simply plunked somewhere without really good partnership.
Yeah, one of the things that I really like about what you're saying there is in a lot of research applications and grants these days, there's a lot of uh, emphasis put on, well, what capacity are you going to build in the Indigenous communities and so on, which is a good thing, obviously, but I do feel there's a lack of conversation about what capacity our communities and people are going to build with people in the South. And listening to your narrative, it was very clear that people involved in this project were able to help bring you up to speed and build a lot of capacity that you obviously didn't come into this project with. And
Mm-hmm.
I think more stories like that are important to share as well, because people in the South have a lot of things to learn from people in the North also, and there's different skill sets and capacities, and we need to be more cognizant of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like I would have been a total fish out of water if
That's a
I
great
if I hadn't
analogy.
if I hadn't engaged with a co-management institution. Yeah, like I think like even from just like an ethical standpoint, plunking yourself somewhere where you don't have any idea what's going on is not a good idea for anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great. Well, I want to thank you for doing this morning, and I also wanted to give you a shout out and thank you for all the work that you've been doing on the Co-Management Commons website, and that help has been invaluable this summer. And I know your partner James has even been enlisted to help with some things from time to time. So it's almost like a mini crab plant analogy where all hands have been on deck to figure out how to connect databases and what is
Yes.
AI and how does it work and all those fun things. But it's all coming together, and really appreciate your help on all that as well.
Oh, yes. Thank you for the vision. It's coming together very nicely. Thanks so much, Jamie. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, take care. We'll chat very soon.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jamie Snook, and thank you for listening to another episode of the Co-Management Commons Show. Honoring the spirit and intent of agreements with Indigenous peoples is an important form of reconciliation and social justice, and educating ourselves about opportunities with co-management is time well spent. This conversation continues, so please like, share, subscribe, and visit www.comanagement.ca. Join me again next time for another interesting discussion about the co-management of fish and wildlife in Canada and around the world.